All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. For this video, I am very, very happy and excited to be joined by not only a veteran drummer, but I dare say the nicest guy in Boston hardcore, Mr. Mark McKay. Mark,
Joel, you're very kind. Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. I've been wanting to chat with you for a long time, and I'm glad we finally were able to hook it up. So,
yeah, it's been a minute since I've seen you. I think the last time was maybe the SSD thing, the book release
the
party.
book release, yeah, yeah, which was a blast.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Nancy did such an amazing job putting that together,
Absolutely.
and it's another example of how much I've grown to love being up here in New England now because so many people from the scene that I listened to when I was a real little kid
Mhm.
living in New Jersey, there so many of you guys are still active up here, so it's really nice to kind of connect and see the history for myself.
Yeah, agreed. It's really nice for me too because having been out of it for quite some time, it always feels like a reunion when people do come out for special events and things, and it's becoming more common, as like people are being more interested in the history of it. A lot of people are still around and they're still, they're willing to talk about it and participate. So it's really great.
Excellent. And you've got quite a history that we'll be diving into as we unfold things here. But
Okay.
for people who may not be familiar with you, you were the longtime drummer for the band Slapshot,
Mhm.
formed in the 1980s, classic Boston hardcore band. You've done some other stuff as well, including currently The Long Wait, which is the band you're out with now. We'll definitely get into that a bit later.
Mhm.
But to kind of rewind it all to the very beginning,
Mm,
you grew up in Malden, right, in
I
Massachusetts?
did. Yeah, correct.
And when and how did music and particularly drumming become such a major part of your life?
Yeah, a great question. I grew up in a very musical family, in that like everyone listened to music. There was always music playing in the house. My folks played records. My brother was interested in performing early, so he got a guitar when he was 10 years old or something like that. So there was always music in the house, but I never played an instrument or anything like that. I just had a deep love for it. So, growing up on like prog rock stuff, when I was very young, I was kind of ripe for punk rock when it finally, came my way, which was just around 79, 80. I knew at that point that I had to participate somehow. I was like this like talentless little kid. I didn't play an instrument or anything. Like, how do I participate in this? So just starting to go to punk shows and things like that, and I'm drumming all the time, so it felt natural to kind of become a drummer. And when I saw the Ramones, like that was it. Like I knew that I was going to play drums like the Ramones. So you know, found some kindred spirits. Some folks I was going to high school with, a very small, select group of punk rock kids were really into it, and kind of convinced me that it looked like what I was doing with my hands was like real drumming, so I should buy a drum set.
Hmm,
So that's what I did with my graduation money. So,
cool. So in those early days, were you checking out the local bands at that time? The scene in Boston. As you know, I had Willie Alexander on a few days ago.
fantastic.
Yeah, and he great guy. And there was a lot of cool stuff happening in Boston in the late 70s, early 80s, sort of pre what became Boston hardcore.
Mhm.
Were you checking out any of those bands, the real kids of the scene and Willie and stuff like that?
So no, I didn't come across any of those folks until the early '80s when I was um, kind of feeling a bit more adventurous to leave Malden and go in and to see like club shows in Boston, that I could get into because there were a few venues that would do the occasional all age show. And the channel in Boston, the legendary channel, they started doing these Sunday matinees, and they would have like five bands for a buck or something, some arbitrary fee to get in. And at those shows, I started seeing bands like boy's life, right? Who were from Malden too, and I didn't know that. Started seeing bands like the Outlets. So kind of like, second generation kind of like punk bands from Boston. I saw Mission of Burma at one of those things. Some of my friends that were in my high school also like participated in those. Kids that were 2 and 3 years ahead of me, who had like mod bands and things like that, were participating in these all ages shows. And it was just such a rush, to like, here I am, this, 16, 17-year-old kid in the club seeing these fantastic bands and learning and, participating in, what I found out to be the scene. So it just was like a roller coaster. It really just, took off. I thought that was like, I had to be involved in this somehow. So yeah, just incredible. It was just so fortunate I could jump on the train in my hometown and get off the train, in this exciting new city with these fantastic bands and performances that I was seeing. So,
Cool. Now, was Terminally Ill your first band officially as a
well, I never played a note with Terminally Ill. Terminally Ill was Steve, who I went to high school with, Chris Lauria, who I went to high school with, Adam Goodwin, who on the drums, who I went to high school with as well, and this guy George, who I think he was already out of high school at that point, but he lived in the area too. He had transplanted from California. So these guys, coalesced into this group because they all could actually play their instruments, and I was just hanging around, because they were my friends. They were the kids I hung out with and went to shows with and that sort of thing. So when Terminally Ill, I mean, they did like 2 recordings. They played a couple of real, good high profile shows, but lost their drummer, and they asked me to play drums, and I wasn't playing drums at that time, right? I hadn't even gotten my drum kit, um, so I hit a snare drum along with what they were doing, but it wasn't to be. I think they just broke up at that point. If I remember the timeline correct, they broke up,
Hmm.
by mid '83.
So was Slapshot your first band then?
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Talk
So it
about
was, after Terminally Ill, right? I mean, we're all still in touch and hanging out and everything, um, and then it was Steve from Terminally Ill. We went to a music store in Malden Center and bought myself a drum kit. So Steve and I knew that we wanted to do a band, and I think Chris had gone on to do something that was a little bit more heavy metal. We're all still in touch, but Steve and I just knew that we had that thing together that we wanted to do something. That was the genesis of the whole thing. So it was just Steve and I just being best pals and wanting to work together in the worst way.
well, certainly by the formation of Slapshot, um, Choke, was a veteran of the whole thing,
Yeah.
obviously, with effects and last rites. How did that hookup happen? Because you guys were kind of fresher to the scene, and he already had
Yeah.
like his history behind him.
Yeah. So we had seen some great shows at that point. I'm sure we had seen SSD and DYS at that point. But we saw this Mission of Burma's final show at the Bradford Ballroom. They were retiring, and this band Negative FX opened up for them. And they famously played, I think, 5 songs before their set deteriorated into like a fight, like a brawl on stage, and they got thrown off. And that to me was very exciting, but also like not exciting. I mean, I was like, I wanted to see this band. They sounded really cool. I'm not into violence. It was just this weird thing that happened. So we saw the singer of the band as a real kind of like a catalyst. He was like a troublemaker. So we just weren't those kind of kids. So we just they broke up after that. I think that was their last show, and then they disappeared. So fast forward just a little bit, we go to this show out in Western Mass. We drove out to the Greenfield Grange night to see DYS. They were playing this show with this band Last Rites, and they played Deep Wound and the Outpatients. I mean, it was going to be a good show, but we didn't know who Last Rites was, but we were going anyway. So we show up to the show, and we see Deep Wound, and it's great. And Last Rites comes on, and I was just like, oh my God, it's that guy. It's that menace from Negative Effects. Oh my God. So we were just shocked. And he was even worse at this show. He was just swinging this mic stand around. Nobody could get near the stage. But they were brilliant. Like the music was just incredible. Um, so we were just drawn to that. But he was like the opposite of how I wanted to be. Loved the music, but he was just a menace. Um, so fast forward just a little bit, and my friend Jennifer calls me up and says, "You started dating this guy. You're not going to believe who it is." And I had no idea who this person was. And sure enough, it was Chuck. And I couldn't believe it. So yeah, we got together, and Choke just he glared at me like from across the room. He didn't say anything to me. He just stared at me with those big Coke bottle glasses. And he looked at my driver's license. He asked to see my driver's license because he didn't believe my last name was McKay or something. He was just trying to be intimidating or something. But at that point, like I think he just saw that I was kind of like an okay guy or something. And I kind of found that he was like maybe just pushing buttons. That was his thing. So we started just chatting, and we had the gym company. So we started chatting, and Steve had been running into Choke like at a supermarket, like late at night. He ran into him 3, 4, 5 times, like shopping.
Hmm.
And Choke just started chatting with him about starting a new band. Like he just, looking to get some folks together to start this new band. And then Steve said to me, "We're going to make this happen. Let's do this with Choke." So, we had kind of, put those differences, not even differences, just misunderstandings behind us. And we got together and we got a rehearsal space, and the three of us just showed up and started writing songs. It just
And
kind of happened. It really happened. It's crazy.
and John Anastas completed the original lineup. He came in on bass from DYS, of course.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, Choke asked him to just come down and jam with us, and he showed up, and he's a great guy. So he slid right in, and it clicked. I mean, we had a kind of unified idea of what we wanted to sound like, the image we wanted to portray, and the way that we were. So it clicked really quickly.
Excellent. Which brings us to the first Slapshot release, which is Back on the Map,
Mhm.
EP, Tang Records. Because I can get it straight from you instead of reading it in a book somewhere,
Mhm.
I want to ask this question. When Slapshot started, it was kind of past the original era of Boston hardcore, obviously.
Mhm.
And the bands that were still kind of around, the SSDs, the DYSs, they were kind of either on their way out, or soon to be on their way out, or
Mhm.
they were playing more hard rock sounding stuff. Perfect example being the last SSD record, which is not the same band it was on the first record.
Right.
So a lot of people have said Back on the Map, the title was inspired by the fact that, Slapshot's bringing back the old school hardcore sound and vibe. How accurate is that?
That's 100%. That is 100% accurate. The lyrics to that song, if I remember correctly, are like, we got to get it back. We got to get Boston back to be a hardcore powerhouse. We want straight edge bands, to be in here because that's the legacy of Boston. We wanted to put Boston back on the hardcore map, not just this is a great place to be. It's like, this is a great place to be for hardcore
Yeah.
destinations. So yeah, you're 100%, you're spot on about that. Because I'd stopped listening to metal bands in the 70s, right? And I just started listening to anything that wasn't metal, because I was just tired of it. And I didn't think it had any place in the hardcore scene. It really didn't. So I wanted it to all be, just hit those things as hard as you can.
Right, right. Let's talk about straight edge for a second,
Mm,
specifically Boston straight edge.
mhm,
Um, I started getting into those records around 88, so I was like 11, 12 years old.
mhm.
And living in New Jersey, I was going to we were fortunate, we had a punk record store about 20 minutes from me. So I coaxed somebody from my family to drive me down there, and I'd pick up zines, or older friends would tell me about bands. I'd go get them.
Mm,
So I'm listening to these Boston hardcore records, and they're kind of intimidating as all hell. It's like, they're beating people up for smoking up there in Boston.
mhm.
They're doing that. Um, I do have a sneaking suspicion, having met a lot of you guys, although you're a bit older now, there may have been obviously a legitimate lifestyle, but as far as the hardcore, we will F you up if you do this, there may be a little bit of showbiz in part of that, or was it really that militant back then where people would have fights over, what somebody was doing at a show?
No, you rarely saw that. And if anything like that did happen, there were extenuating circumstances. Somebody was being a violent drunk, or somebody was being, uh, a menace, while on drugs or something like that. So, I think it was important to kind of like protect your scene from elements like that, like people who were, not good drunks. Yeah, I mean, if you were to like reject everybody in the scene that drank, there'd be like 10 people there. You know what I mean? There wasn't a ton of straight edge people in Boston. It was a great movement, and it was a strong movement, but so many people just didn't. So, just did whatever they want, which is fine. But at the time, we just saw like people who were being violent and being uh, people getting killed and people dying, because of drugs and alcohol. So it was really a visceral reaction to that kind of stuff, rather than like, you came to our show and you've got a beer in your hand, you're going to get it.
Right.
That
Right.
never happened.
Yeah, I had a sneaking suspicion that was
Yeah.
BS and drama, and my 10-year-old, 11-year-old imagination was getting the best of me.
Yeah, well, we weren't doing anything to dissuade people from thinking that, right? We weren't just saying, "Oh, hey, listen, this is a very personal thing." We were saying, "Yes, you will not drink at our shows," and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
To I always saw it as a very tongue in cheek kind of thing, because if anybody took the time to really talk to you, they would know. That's just inflation.
well,
Funny to talk about after all these years. It's just it's so funny, how strongly we felt about it, and the image we chose to portray on those records and things like that. It's really just interesting.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm kind of the age now at 46 where, if I wasn't striving for straight edge growing up, I certainly am now, because
Mm,
I think I may have mentioned this to Loco when I was talking to him. You reach your 40s, man, and people who don't behave, they start going upstairs, and
yep.
it's like, you know, there's only so long you can do certain things before it taps on the shoulder and takes you out of the room.
Yep. Yep.
But I wanted to share a quick story with you. When I was 11 years old, I used to take drum lessons from an older kid in my neighborhood. And one day he said, "Have you ever heard of punk rock before?" I said, "What the hell is punk rock?" I had no idea. So he hands me a mix cassette that says punk on it. He goes, "Take this home and listen to it."
Amazing.
And the first song was Blitzkrieg Bop, and that was a life-changing moment. Then,
Mhm.
DKs, Sex Pistols, Agent Orange, all the stuff you'd want to hear on your very first punk mixtape.
Mhm.
So I fell in love with that, and I go over, ride my bike over to his house. Punk rock is amazing. It's awesome. He's like, "Well, if you like punk, now you got to listen to hardcore." And I'm like,
Yes.
I'm like, "What's hardcore?" He goes, "I'm going to give you something to introduce you to hardcore." And I have a prop here. I have a couple. He handed me this,
Oh my gosh.
which
Wow.
of course I still have. Slapshot, Step on It, Tang Records.
Is that the cassette?
That is the cassette.
Wow.
Yep. And it's still in somewhat good shape.
Oh my gosh, Joel. Wow.
I've had it all this time.
That's so I'm turning red. I think that's just so like I love hearing that kind of stuff. You never ever get tired of hearing people say like you're an influence or you were my first show or something like that. It just blows my mind that we were able to contribute in some small way, or in a large way. It's just incredible. So thank you for that. That means a lot to me.
Yeah, this was it, man. This was the first hardcore record I ever heard. And then the second one was Vision Undiscovered, the Jersey
Hmm.
Vision. So,
Wow.
great way to get into the whole thing. So I wanted to show you that. And ask you specifically about the recording of Step on It. Uh,
Hmm.
Obviously, if you listen to Back on the Map to Step on It, there's a progression there musically. Um, what still stands out for you from that time period recording that album, putting those songs together for it?
For Step on It.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had done Back on the Map in a really big fashion. We went into a real pro studio, did a 24 track recording. I mean, it was, I don't know if it stands as a testament of what we sounded like at the time. There's a lot of studio stuff on that record. It's really thick sounding, right? So I think that Step on It was more like what we should have done. We went into a 16 track studio. We had three-quarters of the record written, and some of this stuff was just ideas we thought would be cool to go in there and just really just put an idea down on tape as fast as we could, without it even being really fleshed out. So we recorded that at a studio over in Fenway, and Joel, for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the studio. Really can't. It was right over by Fenway.
I have the liner notes right here. Let's see what it says.
Well, you'll you'll do me a big favor if you can come up with that. But it was a great studio, uh, and we had a lot of fun doing it too. We weren't like Back on the Map was recorded like to save costs. We recorded it from like midnight till 8 in the morning, over like 3 days. This one we went in there and it was like evenings, but early evenings, and we just played until we didn't feel like playing anymore. We also invited a bunch of friends in to like do backup vocals and stomp on songs and things like that. So it was a lot of fun. It felt like a more of a kind of like I think there's a reverence that was attached to the recording of Back on the Map for us. It was my first time in a recording studio, my first band. Really, really wanted to make it like a great sounding record and a great record with a message and all that stuff. And Step on It was like, we were all getting better on our instruments. We were kind of the message was coalescing a little bit, better friends. So it's a better record in that respect. I think it's a more of a kind of like unified. Although the record is scattered, like the songs are kind of scattered. I think it was a unified vibe at the of what we were at the time. So in that respect, I'm pretty proud of it.
Excellent. Funny enough, the liner notes don't say where it was recorded.
I've spent the last 2 days like scrutinizing where it was. There was this club over in across the street from Fenway called the Ramrod, and it was like upstairs from the club, and I just can't remember what it was called.
It was
I'll put the word out.
it was produced and engineered by people with very difficult last names.
Yeah, yeah.
That I can tell you. But yeah, it doesn't seem to say where it was recorded.
Yeah, strange. I'll come up with it. I'll give you an addendum for that. So
Cool. And of course, that was the first album that Jordan plays on.
that's correct. Yeah, and he was our secret sauce, honestly. John was great, but Jordan was like a really like accomplished musician, in other forms too. Like he knew like classical structures of music and things like that. So he came into it with like the fire of a punk rocker and the skill of somebody who really knew their instrument. And although bass wasn't his first instrument, he could play it like a guitar. So
Mm.
it was just really fantastic, and it really felt like he was a true member of the band. We got along so well. Um, he didn't have that history like John had, and which kind of can manifest itself in a kind of a jaded nature. Jordan was still on fire, a young kid at the time. I think he was like 17 or something. Did that, so yeah, yeah.
So when you were playing live in this era, 'cause I know there were four of you who recorded the album, um, did it quickly become a five-piece at that point, or were you a four-piece for a while with Jordan playing bass
Yeah,
live?
we were four piece. We did a US tour as a four piece, and played a lot of kind of like one offs and going to Albany and Buffalo and things like that. Um, and but I think Jordan as a an accomplished musician, like he wanted to move things forward musically, which was, I mean, perfectly fine for me, because I'm just this punk rock drummer. If somebody can, cover up my inability with their skill, then by all means. So he wanted to be, a guitarist. So we decided that a five piece would probably be a good fit for us. We wanted to be more powerful and be, you know, just more of a force, and bring another person into it to kind of push it forward. And that was kind of a thing at the time too. Like five-piece bands were popular, and so we just kind of jumped on that. Um, and Choke had talked to Jamie from SSD about coming down and playing with us, and at that point I was just like, come on, this Malden high school kid is like playing in a band with Choke and John Anastas and Jamie from SSD. These bands I grew up on, as a teenager, of course, but I, grew up um, in the punk world and playing in a band with these guys. But immediately Jamie came in and just
Mm.
like it fit, it's just unbelievable. I mean, it's a testament to him, to be able to come into this already existing thing and people he didn't know, he knew Choke, but he didn't know me and Stephen Jordan to come in and just start firing on all cylinders. It was just amazing, amazing.
So I'm looking, when I first saw this record and started getting into it, obviously you credit Hank as
Yeah,
road manager, and he's part of the photo collage.
yeah.
So my filter's not helping me, but trust me, he's in here. Um, so clearly, he was a major part of the band. So let's talk about Hank, the
Mhm.
Reverend Hank, and how he kind of got involved in the picture and the sort of impact he had with you guys during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, we had seen Hank at shows before we met him, and he was the wildest dancer and like always had the biggest smile on his face, and just seemed like he was just the coolest guy. So you gravitate to people like that in the scene, and there's not a lot of uh, um, uh, you win when you approach somebody like that. Like you just add somebody to your tribe like that, and Hank fell in immediately. And as soon as we started doing the band, I mean, he just was around all the time, anyways. So he had experience with that. He had been on the road with bands before, and but he was just another member. He was just another guy in the band. So whenever we went, he went. Whenever we had something going on, he was there. Um, just, I mean, to this day, I love him so much. He lives, like 2 miles from here, and so we try and see each other as much as we can. Um, but everything from selling merchandise to lugging gear to pushing people off stage who are getting too close to the stuff. You know, an invaluable fifth or sixth member, as the case would be. Yeah, he was with us all the time.
Excellent. And of course, I have a Hank story. Um, I got to show this, which my filter is not going to help me with again. But there's a story with this. This is For the Long Wait, a flyer for Mark, your current band, which we'll get into.
Oh, for the show over at Notch Brewing there, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
But the funny thing about this, and I mentioned it to you that day, but I was last April, I was down at Bridge 9 for Record Store Day. Al and Nancy were there, Jamie, Chris from SSD, the great Larry Kelly was there, you were there, so
Hmm.
we're all kind of hanging out. And you guys were playing that evening, your first ever show.
That's right.
with White Dynamite and the Casket Rats.
Hmm.
So Hank's there handing out flyers for the show, and he hands me a flyer, and I look at it, and the corner is torn, right? I mean, these are thin flyers, Xeroxed, what have you. I hate this filter sometimes, but use your imagination.
Yeah.
Here. So the corner's torn, right? And these are thin, you know, nothing to them kind of flyers. One would think if a tear happened to one of them, it would be thrown out in the garbage, right? Because you probably made 100, 200 of them. Presumably, Hank scotch taped the corner back in position and still handed it out. That's commitment. That's commitment.
So that's the kind of guy he is, right? I mean, we had been flyering other shows and things like that too, and you know, it's just that attention to detail that I think is Hank, right? It's not an affectation; it's the way he is. He's the most thoughtful and wonderful guy that you ever want to meet. So yeah, that's amazing.
I'm
I'm
just
glad
honored.
you still have that.
I'm just honored I have the hanked taped flyer. So if you watch this, Hank, thank you. I
I
I
love
own
it.
it with pride.
Oh my God. That was a great day too. That was a fun day.
Yeah, especially going from B9 to your gig.
Yeah.
And I stopped over at the Witchboard Museum in Salem too.
Oh, cool, cool.
Yeah, with John Kozik's
Ryan
place.
Kosick, that's right.
That was a great day. And there'll be another day like that coming up in a couple weeks that we'll talk about a little later here.
Right on.
Um, but I want to get into Sudden Death Overtime.
Hmm.
It was the next Slapshot album.
Yeah.
Uh, I bought that record on cassette the moment I saw it. I didn't even know it was out. I just saw, oh, there's a new Slapshot record. So I hadn't heard a note of it, but I bought the record or the cassette, brought it home. Instantly, two things struck me. One, it's grooving
Yeah.
because the first song is What's at Stake. With the heavy bass, you and Jamie, you've got a groove going. It's a more mid-tempo song. And the guitars are, I think it's fair to say there was a metallic influence there
Yeah.
with the guitars. And the production, I think, was boosted a little bit. Throughout the record, it's probably my favorite Slapshot record.
Oh, right
Um,
on.
I really enjoyed it then. I still enjoy it now. So there's clearly, to my ears, a musical progression from
Yeah.
Bonnet to Sudden Death Overtime.
Yeah.
Was that something that happened kind of organically just through the experience of playing together so long, or was it more of a conscious, we need to kind of step it up a little bit for the next record?
So kind of a combination of both, Joel, to tell you the truth. We had in between Step on It and Sudden Death Overtime, we had kind of come in contact with a lot of local bands who were doing some really, really cool things, cool, different things, right? Maelstrom was one of the bands that we became friendly with, and who were doing it, like just stuff I hadn't heard. I hadn't heard anything like that, and they were such perfectionists and great performers and all that stuff. Um, so Zach from Maelstrom, he came on the road with us a couple of times too, and became a real close friend of ours too. And he had a distinctive like metal and kind of groove vibe to him, right? So that kind of filtered its way in, was just like these our like you said, our abilities on our instruments were getting a little bit better, feeling more comfortable with each other. Bands like Maelstrom, even Wrecking Crew, who I just adore. I think they're one of the greatest bands ever. But the stuff that they were doing, it wasn't like that, but it influenced me in a way that was different from listening to like mine. So the production, I think, helped a lot on that record. because the demos were much rougher. So luckily the production really pushed that to the next level, really into a really kind of what I feel special place. Because Sudden Death Overtime is probably my favorite Slapshot record as well. Zach actually came in the studio with us and played rhythm on a couple of tracks. I think he even wrote one of the songs too. On a demo tape I have, it's called Zach's Song. I just can't recall what it is. So we were like, a lot of influences were coming across. Like Bad Brains had reformed, and they were making records like Quickness and that kind of stuff. So it wasn't so Fast and Furious anymore. It was power, like what SSD had done with After Get It Away, the How We Rock, right? Yeah. That kind of stuff, So, but with a little bit more kind of groove to it, people are starting to listen to like Jane's Addiction and that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of influences. However, the reason it's called Sudden Death Overtime is because we didn't think that we were going to be a band past that. It was like, well, what else can we possibly do? Like, we're getting bigger audiences and better shows, but can we actually keep this up? Years. How long can a band like this last? So we came up with the title of Sudden Death Overtime because we felt like we were like in a place where we didn't know if we were going to continue. But it was the recording of that record that really kind of put us back into a different space of really pride in what we were doing and a better feeling about what we were doing. So it's a record kind of born of desperation, but we also really took our time on it and tried to make it great. I guess I just call it a rock record, but
I still love it. It was definitely primed for the 90s. It's funny you mentioned influence. To me, it's a very 90s sounding record.
Absolutely.
For that time, and there's definitely a strength to that record.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, okay, well, it's going somewhere else. And I like when it goes somewhere else. I like when bands go somewhere else. It's not just every record.
Yeah.
Different happening.
So we recorded that at Fort Apache too, which was a great studio. So that was a better experience for us too. We really took our time. The outside influences, the inside influences as well, and the engineer that we had, Tim O'Hare, who worked with us on that one, just really worked as a producer for us too, and we never had that before. So it was really great.
Yeah. Well, it definitely shows.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you.
And all the songs are great. I don't want to jump right into the potential controversy of the album, but a band like Slapshot in 1990 comes out with a song called Punk's Dead, You're Next. Do I have it correct that the response may have been somewhat emotional to that release, or?
So yes, in some cases it was. I had a problem with that as well. And that was one of the things that Choke and I used to do. We used to kind of woodshed ideas, right? He would say, give me an idea, and I would tell him why it was a bad idea, and he would tell me why it was a good idea in his mind. So we would kind of jockey back and forth until we would come to a point where both of us kind of agreed. Like, he saw my point of view, I saw his point of view. In retrospect, I think it was a bad idea to do that song. But at the time, like I said, we talked about it a lot, about what the message actually was for that kind of song. So I was like a spiky punk kid. I had a leather jacket with studs and a mohawk and all that stuff. But I had kind of saw that necessarily wasn't the best way for me. So from a very personal standpoint, I had moved away from that, and I was trying to be shaved head and sneakers and no frills, and I thought that was the best way to be, was to kind of hone things down to the bare minimum. And it's ironic that we made such a record that was kind of had so many flourishes on it, right? Yeah, it's interesting. It's like a case study in itself.
Well, I mean, really, for me, the masterpiece of that album, where I thought, wow, this band is really getting to a different place, was the White Rabbit cover.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
I can't tell you how many mixtapes that song has landed on in my lifetime.
Joel, honestly,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. I mean, I remember I played that for my father when I was 13, 14 years old. I'm like, because he was always kind of like, what are you into? Like, what are you listening to? My parents were really supportive of everything. So this is all their
Mhm.
fault. But what are you listening to these days? Like, oh, this is a band from Boston called Slapshot. And I played him that, and he's like, because he loves Jefferson Airplane too. So I'm like, what do you think of this? And he goes, I really like the first half of the song,
Yeah, yeah,
hate the second half of the song. I said,
yeah.
well, you kind of have to know the band to, get into it. But I think the first half of that, when, there's clean singing, musicianship, I mean, that could have been a college radio hit, in my opinion.
Hmm.
I really
Wow.
could have been like the single, and the way Just Like Heaven was for Dinosaur Jr.
Yeah.
I always thought White Rabbit could have done the same thing for Slapshot.
Wow. Joel, I don't even know what to say. I'm honored. I mean, it was a late inclusion to the record, right? Um, Choke pulled it out of nowhere. He said, I want to cover White Rabbit. And I said, I don't know that song. I knew the song, but I couldn't play it, right? So we literally had to go from the studio to Newbury Comics and buy a tape of it and play it in the studio to like figure it out. So that's why it's kind of rough and ready, is because none of us could replicate that. We hadn't rehearsed it. We rehearsed it in the studio, two takes before we did it, and that was it. So what you get, what you get is what you get. But we thought that the idea of like altering the sort of the druggy lyrics in the first half with the straight edge thing of in the second half was kind of inspired. I still think that's kind of clever. I'm happy it's on there. And I'm extremely happy that it meant something to you, because I think um, that's really what it's all about. It's resonating with somebody. So wow, thank you. That's incredible.
Yeah, well, you got to remember, man, I wasn't driving in those days. I was
Mhm.
barely out of the elementary school. So all I had were my records and the occasional zine that would tell me which other records to buy.
Yeah,
So I mean, I lived in this music so much in
yeah,
and through Slapshot, I got into Gangrene,
mhm.
Mission of Burma,
Yeah, yeah,
uh, Kill Slug, which was its own planet, but
absolutely.
and for a couple years there, I was really into the whole Tang thing,
Yeah.
like heads but Slapshot was ground zero because my buddy said, "Hey, you need to have this record," and he was right. He was right.
I'm just honored, Joel. Thank you. That really means so much to me. I really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, what you guys were doing up there was hitting some suburban nerd in Jersey. So thank you.
I'm so glad of that. I'm so pleased. Thank you.
So it was around this time or shortly thereafter, Chris Laria from Terminally Ill enters the picture.
Yeah, yeah,
And it was the other four of you and Chris for a bit. But if I'm not mistaken, it wasn't too long after that the slap shot that I knew at that point was no more, right?
mhm,
That band had split up. Um, what led to the parting of the ways there at the
yeah.
time?
So, um, yeah, so it just kind of caught up with me, right? I mean, having to kind of like fight about song lyrics. I'm making it seem worse than it is, but it's like it was that constant back and forth. I mean, Choke is type one person, I'm type two person, and although we were the best of friends, we just didn't mesh, right? So there was there was tension all the time. We also, there were, uh, musical differences in the band, like as far as like, my drumming was not getting any better. Steve's guitar playing was not getting any better. We weren't like moving forward in a meaningful way, right? So there was just friction. I mean, it was just band friction. We'd been together for 5 years. Um, we had some success, but we'd been through a bunch of members at this point too, right? So things are starting to kind of like fray, and it, so it's kind of ancient history, honestly. It's a lot of it is covered in the documentary that was made about Slapshot too, the cautionary tale, that should kind of give you a little
Chip on
what's
my
in there.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I won't go too far into it here, but it really was just kind of a fraying of uh, of friendships and kind of closeness that we should have talked about and didn't talk about. So things just kind of got out of hand, and they had a big tour planned, and I couldn't get the time off of work, so I just said, "Hey, listen, get a replacement and go on this tour," and they did, and when they came back, we just never got back in touch. So that was it for me. And we had, unceremoniously kicked out Steve prior to that. So it just was, yeah, things were just not good. So getting out of that atmosphere was a good thing for me. Yeah.
Well, for the viewer, I should mention that, and you just alluded to it, there is a documentary on Slapshot, Chip on My Shoulder, A Cautionary Tale of Slapshot, which I checked before we got together. I don't believe it's currently streaming, but I know it's still available on DVD.
Mm.
Very interesting movie.
Yeah.
It's into a lot of things about the inner workings of bands, which sometimes could get sticky. Lord knows I've been in enough of them myself to know
You're right. Right.
doesn't always work. But Slapshot with Jack at the helm did carry on.
Mm.
Never officially broke up. I mean, he's had the band kind of consistently since that time.
Yeah.
And on more than one occasion, you did come back to the band
Yeah.
and did some more recordings, did some more shows.
Yeah. Yeah.
When was the last time you actually performed as a member of Slapshot?
I believe the last show I played was in Belgium. We did a tour with like 7 Seconds and Sick of It All, and it was just this massive tour, and it was a lot of fun. Um, but I got really, really run down from it. And it was ticking all the boxes as far as like I get to play, I get to hang out with my friends, but it wasn't satisfying my soul, right? It just wasn't like wasn't making me feel great about myself. So after that, I just called it quits, and I ended up filling in a couple times after that, and I'm like, as a hired gun, totally, but like as a member of this thing, I have to be done. So I think it was like 2008, 2009 was the last official show I played, which was an amazing show. Like, I mean, I went out truly on a high note, but
Yeah, yeah.
that had to be it.
Well, fast forwarding the story a little bit, it was
Mm.
in 2021, there was a performance under the name Slap Not. I was very, very fortunate to attend
Yeah.
at the Middle East. Um, and to give a kind of a brief history before I hand it to you to kind of explain how the pieces fit.
Mm.
It was a lot of past members of Slapshot coming up and serving as like the backing band, and then it was like karaoke where people can sign up, and you had a bunch of guest singers coming up and performing with you that day.
Mhm.
And it was cool because you got pretty much everybody,
Yeah.
all the surviving members of Slapshot
Yeah.
playing.
There was only like one or two who were unable to attend. So yeah.
Yeah. So I'll give it to you because I know
Mm.
there was a lot of logistics that had to go into making that possible. How did that whole thing come to be, and especially getting so many people on board to be a part of it?
Yeah. Yeah. So just briefly, like Hank and I had been talking about starting a nonprofit that would benefit like people in punk rock bands that didn't have health care or had health conditions. Like instead of doing a GoFundMe, we could be like a receptacle for money for people who needed it. That kind of it it was something we really wanted to do. So when Slapshot announced their 35th anniversary weekend at the Middle East, we thought it would be hilarious to do what we, like this, get all the other members of Slapshot together and play this gig, and it would be a charity gig, right? We would choose there was no way we were going to get that. So we were going to donate the money to a charity. So we put the word out to everybody that was around. Hey, listen, we're going to start doing this gig. That'll be a karaoke thing, and then we just ran with it. I mean, any idea was on the table. It was just hilarious. So we took a rehearsal space up at this place up in Wakefield, Jam Spot, right? Because they had a huge room set up, right? And yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. So they let us go in and rented this room, and we made up a spreadsheet of everybody that was going to come up on particular nights, and came up, and we would run through a couple songs. It's like, well, this lineup did this song, so we'll do it. These 3 songs with these guys. We had some guest singers come up just to go through lyrics and things like that. So we had 3 or 4, maybe 5 rehearsals up there, and it was a logistical nightmare, but it was hilarious. And then, we booked the Middle East upstairs the same night that Slapshot was playing. And we did that gig, had people sign up for karaoke, had our guest singers in line, and made up shirts. And the charity we chose was Punk Rock Saves Lives. And we'll just put a tag for them on punkrocksaveslives.org. And they just do great work. Please check out the website and support them if you can. And I think we raised something like $2,500, for the charity. So it was pretty successful in that respect. But we had a blast. We literally had a blast. Yeah.
Excellent. And I will put that website in the video description for this interview when I.
Oh, thank you, Jim. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we certainly do want to mention, in the context of this event, rest in peace, Jordan Wood. Very much missed.
Yeah.
And you did mention that the current Slapshot, was playing the same venue at different parts. Yeah. And you, Anastas, and Steve got up with Choke and did a reunion of the original lineup that evening.
Yeah, we did. I forgot about that. You're right. Which was wild because we hadn't played together since 1986 or something like that. And we didn't rehearse beforehand. I mean, we literally just got up and played for just raw. So that was a trip. That was a super trip. To play Slapshot songs with those guys again was really one of the points, honestly.
Well, I mean, very, very few bands get to have a 35th anniversary show where the original guys are still there and able to.
Incredible, right?
Yeah. That was a great day, seeing you guys in the afternoon, then going downstairs, Murphy's Law opened.
Yep.
The main show, and then to have you guys come up and close it out with the original band was cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good, and it felt like it was very exciting, and it really felt like closure for me too. It's just like ending at the beginning was just like close that loop. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Which kind of brings us to what you're doing musically now.
Yeah.
Which is a band called The Long Wait. Has some familiar faces in it. Am I correct that the Slap Knot thing was kind of the genesis to get that whole thing rolling?
Yeah, 100%. We had such a good time during those rehearsals, and it was so great to see people. I mean, I hadn't seen Jamie in I probably 20 years or something like that. So I can't remember who actually mentioned it. I think it was Jamie, actually. He was interested in, he said, we had such a great time. Let's get together and do something. So initially it was Jamie and Steve and Chris Lauria and myself who went up to Jam Spot because I didn't have any instruments or anything. So we started going up there and jamming, and Chris just couldn't commit the time to it. So yeah, we felt so good about it and felt so good musically that we wanted to just do The Long Wait. And that's why it's called The Long Wait, because we had waited so damn long to get everybody back together in a band that was truly meaningful and for the created in the spirit of just absolute love for music and love for each other and love for the scene. So
Yeah,
that's where we are right now.
it's great. So it's yourself, Jamie, Steve,
Mhm.
Daryl Shepard, who
Daryl Shepard.
a later incarnation of Slapshot
Yeah.
during the blast furnace era,
Mhm.
90s. And please forgive me, I can't believe this, but I forgot your singer's name.
Oh, no problem. No problem. It's Glenn Dudley from Wrecking Crew.
Yes, sorry, Glenn.
So Glenn, of course, had been a friend of ours since back in the 80s as well. So I loved Wrecking Crew. I put out a record for them. I love them so much. So we originally had Keith Bennett from Wrecking Crew singing for us, but he couldn't commit the time either. So Glenn was a natural choice for us. And he slid right in and he's just got a work ethic that's just second to none. I mean, he brings it every time. So I yeah, I'm 100% happy with things that are happening with this band, and it's just incredible to say
Yeah.
that, you know.
And you debuted at a brewery, we should mention.
That's correct. Yeah. So the straight edge thing is still strong with me. You know, I still call myself as such. I still live by, you know, the way that I think I should and is best for me. And yeah, you know, we just found that like the places that were booking shows that would get like, you know, the best organized shows and the best and the most amount of people in there, you know, were places like, you know, breweries and rock clubs and things like that. So you know, we didn't necessarily want to start doing basements again. You know, we wanted this to be fun for us too, as selfish as that sounds. I mean,
Sure.
have a good time doing this too, you know, because if it grinds on us too much, you know, we may end prematurely or something. So we try and take care of ourselves at every turn. So yeah, there's been some really great venues we've been playing. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I know for myself, there was a certain point in my time regularly playing in bands where you kind of get as great as they are, you do kind of get burned out on the punk rock venues, where there's like an inch of puke on the steps as you're loading your drums out during a
yep.
rainstorm. You don't kind of want to do that anymore,
Yeah.
especially on a Tuesday night when you got to work.
Right. I
So
still love going to shows. You know, I've started to kind of take in some more shows with a friend of mine. I like really having a great time going out to shows again. But you know, it's like setting up and playing to you know, like we want to sound great. We want to sound powerful and make a good impression and that kind of stuff. And so that's why some of you know, we're a little choosy about the venues that we play, but you know, I mean, we do it for the love of it and just want to put on a good show, you know.
Well, I know one show you're doing coming up, because it kind of coincides with some interesting things going on this date. You're playing 420,
We are.
which is awesome. Long wait. Now, where is that gig taking place?
So forgive me for looking away, but I'm looking at the our Instagram, the Long Wait Boston, so that I can get the correct dates. So that's the 420 show, which is actually our 1 year anniversary from our first gig anniversary, like to it almost a day. And that's at the Thirsty First in Lowell. And that's us, Sonic, our friends in Sonic Bomb, and our friends in TJ Welch and the Wasted.
Cool.
So yeah, totally stoked about that. So we have a few shows coming up. You know, that's one we're pretty excited about. We're actually excited about them all. We love to play.
Yeah, excellent. And in the video description, I'll put where people can follow the band and learn about shows and other things you have going on.
Right on.
It's kind of interesting though, because that, on 420, earlier that day, Ray Cappo is doing his book signing at Bridge 9. Did
No
you?
way.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'll have to stop by there. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I think our good friend Drew Stone is going to be moderating a little discussion there as well.
Wow. I gotta get a bit more educated about what's happening now. That sounds really cool.
So
You
I'll
gonna
be,
be down there?
oh yeah,
Oh, good.
oh yeah, no doubt. No, it'll be like last year, starting in the day at Bridge 9. Probably check out some witch boards, say hi to John. and
Yep.
then I'll cruise over to your gig. So it'll be like
That's got to be another stop for me as the Witchboard. I haven't been over there yet, so I'm excited.
it's awesome. And
Yeah,
John's awesome,
yeah, he is awesome. Yeah,
cool, cool way to spend some time for sure.
I love it. I love it.
Well, yeah, so I'll be spending my 420 with you and Ray Capo.
I think that's fantastic. You know what? I can't think of a better way to spend it, you know?
Well, real quick story. I think you'll appreciate this. Um, when Bridge 9 Records had its like the night before the grand opening, remember they had a party there?
Yep.
And I went to that. You were there. Larry was there. Al, Jamie. Really cool time. But it was kind of a late night for me on a
Mm.
Friday. I left work, went down there. Then I came all the way back up here to New Hampshire. And I'm like really struggling like the last 45 minutes of the drive.
Oh, Joel.
So I even pulled over a couple of times,
Yeah.
but I'm like, I'm too close to home. I feel okay. If I didn't feel okay, I wouldn't have driven home. But I finally got to my driveway in my apartment complex, shut the car off. I'm like, I'm just gonna rest my eyes for a minute. I woke up hours later in my car. Okay.
No.
The sun was beaming, the whole. So later that day, I run into my neighbor who's this really cool elderly lady. And she's like, so you slept in your car last night, huh? I'm like, yeah, I was really tired. I couldn't make the walk up the stairs. And she's like, hey, well, as long as you're not doing anything bad. She's probably thinking I'm out drugging and boozing. We
Yeah,
don't
you know it. Yeah.
hanging out with Slapshot and SSD, but.
Oh, that's classic. Well, as a dad, I'm sorry to hear that, Joel. I want you to be safe and everything like that, but that's a pretty awesome story.
Yeah, I mean, it's just age. It's not addiction or anything. That's not.
Right. Yep.
But I made it home. I made it home safe. I wouldn't have done it otherwise. But every last inch of energy I had went into just pulling into the driveway.
Wow. You did it all for punk rock, Joel.
I did it all
The
for.
story of your life.
I did all for Boston Street. Exhausted. I don't need drugs. The power exhausts me.
This and now 420's coming up and you're gonna live it again. So I love
Gonna live it up with Ray Capo and you and Amy.
it. Oh, it's fantastic.
But before we wrap up, I wanted to talk about some of your other activities. I know you're active at art
Hmm.
as well as writing. So tell me a bit about, some of those endeavors and what you've been doing with those.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for mentioning. I I've always been in kind of a creator of things, right? Whether it was like, building models as a kid or that kind of that kind of thing. I always wanted to keep myself busy and make things that people could dig, right? Just like would say, oh, that's a cool model, or oh, that's a cool story, or something like that. Um, so I started writing quite a few years ago, just writing little passages for myself, and I thought it would be fun to do like an Instagram page that was just writing instead of photographs. So I started doing a story every day, and I ended up doing that for like 4 years, every day for 4 years. And they turned into kind of like shorter poems as I kind of like, again, my craft got a little bit more honed, and I learned that less is more. And even like I did with my drumming, it's like losing drums, is like you can do as much with less as you can with more. But so that was just a great fun thing for me to do. I also do like collage work. I just make small collages and paperwork, and I paint too. Like I have a friend who runs a painting school here in Somerville, so she invited me down, and I was like, I don't know how to paint, and so I've been painting there for like 4 years straight. So uh, I just love to create things, right? I love to express myself any way I can. Music has been the most constant thing for me too, but these other things are very exciting for me and really kind of keep my hands and my brain and my heart busy. So yeah, it's pretty special. Thank you for bringing it up. It's something I don't think about that often, but but I try and be a creator, whenever I can. So
Cool. Now, is there anywhere online where people can check out some of these things?
no, not really. Not really. I had an Instagram page which I haven't been posting on for a couple of years because once I started, just posting. But, it's called McKay Story a Day. If you ever want to go back and just read a bunch of you know things that I did for 4 years. Yeah, I mean it was great fun. The paintings, I paint them and I give them away, so I don't really own anything that I painted. Collage stuff, I was like making collage postcards and just mailing them to people. So yeah, I'm not much of a collector. I just, the art of kind of spontaneous
Mm.
creation, I think is what I'm really more into. And that's why I like punk rock so much, because it was spontaneous creation. I didn't think any of this stuff would last. It was all about, throwing something into canvas and seeing what came out of it and moving on. So that was punk rock for me. It still is. I'm not necessarily interested in having this amazing legacy. I just want to do my best, have a great time with my friends, and entertain some people.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, man, as I mentioned earlier, Step On It was the first hardcore album I ever heard. Um, and one of the greatest gifts I've received in life is, whether it be as a musician or a music journalist or doing this now. A lot of the people I grew up listening to that got me into wanting to do it myself,
Yeah.
are people I've either worked with professionally over the years, or people I've gotten to know as friends. And I'm just so thrilled that you and I made friends so many years ago, and it's been a real
Mhm.
funny, being able to have that with you and to know that, as this little kid, 11 years old, thinking, what are these guys like in this band, and to have an answer to that question and to know that you're not dicks.
Well, I don't know what to say, Joel. Honestly, it's like, I think when I met you, and I think I met you at was it a gig or a movie or something. I think it was in Peabody. But
The Boys from Nowhere premiere,
that's right.
Habit.
Yep, the
And
Cabot. That's right.
Willie Alexander played that day.
That's right. That's right. So when I met you that night, I felt like there was some connection, and I didn't know what it was, but I just, I mean, you're obviously a great guy, but there's, I think there's something that, is truly magical in this punk rock world when you find somebody who, um, you respect and you and understand, and they kind of come out and they're not a dick.
Right.
So it's great. I appreciate your care, through the years of that legacy. You haven't rejected us as fly by nights or jerks or whatever, and took the time. And that's all we really wanted, was for people to look through the bluster and ask us about things. So
Right. Well, I love the long wait. I wish you guys a lot of happiness and fun doing what you're doing. I'll
thank you.
definitely sing you on the 420 show for
All
sure.
right.
And we'll definitely cross paths again. We have a way of doing that, it seems.
This is very true. Yeah.
I'm sure that'll happen. But in the meantime, Mark, thank you so much for being on the channel. I appreciate it.
It was my pleasure, Joel. Thank you so much. It was great to reconnect with you and just kind of spend some time. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we'll have to do it again sometime.
I would love to. I would love to.
Right on. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, brother. Take care.